Hi everyone, it's me, Arden Lee. Today's video, I had a request from someone in the repatterning parlor who asked if I would consider speaking on the role of psychedelics in potentially treating anxiety and depression. They said, I understand this may be a little bit outside of the domain, but why not? It is a little bit outside of my domain in the sense that I do not use psychedelics in my facilitation work with people in the repatterning project. However, a lot of what I teach, a great amount of what I teach, I was able to understand and synthesize because at the same time that I was doing a lot of my research into um, the studies that tell us and that shape what we know about trauma, about beliefs, about addiction, about pattern formation, about neurology, about the ways that our bodies are designed to function in the world to help us cope and survive. A lot of that research, I was also during that time of being on my own path, I was also using psychedelics as a way of gaining greater clarity into my own situation. So I don't think I could have done that path without both of those things, by the way. If I had merely gone into doing psychedelics, I like to think that with the analytical brain that I have, that I still would have arrived at many of those answers by being able to dialogue with a greater intelligence while in that medicinal space. However, I think really what accelerated it for me was doing the reading, doing the research, understanding how all of that functions, and using my psychedelic experiences to really flesh out a complete picture for me and help me to synthesize that and to be able to put that information in a way that I can impart to people in order to help them also grasp and understand it. What I do and what I believe my greatest spiritual gift is my ability to understand and translate. I can go into highly altered states and come out with truths that, at their best, at my best, at everyone's best, um, that people can understand and integrate in order to make their lives better without having to go into that experience with me. I'm able to bring back the teaching and teach people how to apply it to their lives in ways that they will understand and which will get them results without them having to be there and having that experience firsthand. All of that said, because it was so helpful to me, yeah, I absolutely believe that. How can I say this in a way that, in my commercial venture, I believe there should be a lot more funding given to advancing studies in treating depression and anxiety with psychedelics. The organization MAPS is currently doing a lot of that. There is more, more push in government for looser restrictions around psychedelics so that we can study them more and begin to understand their role in treating anxiety and depression. Things like ketamine, MDMA, psilocybin mushrooms, is a big one for sure. Ayahuasca, ayahuasca, I believe, is like the mother of all transformational medicines. Certainly in my perception, anyway. She's really the big guns. So, let's talk a little bit about the mechanics, though, and why this works. Because let's say you don't have access to psychedelics, or for whatever reason that's not something that you want to do. What I want to be able to do, and what's useful to me as being the facilitator and creator of the Repatterning Project, is what can we learn from psychedelics? Why do they work, right? And essentially, what psychedelics provide to us, what these plant medicines, or sometimes artificial medicines give to us, is an experience outside our present realm of consciousness. They provide an altered state of consciousness so that we can view the world in a different way. There's a wonderful quote that gets often repeated by Jason Silva, and the original quote is from Oliver Wendell Holmes. And that quote is that a mind I'm paraphrasing this naturally, but a mind that is stretched by a new experience can never go back to its old dimensions, right? So our minds, our consciousness that gets stretched by an expanding, a new idea, a new expanded awareness of our reality can never go back to its old shape. So that's often what psychedelics do to us, right? This is also the way that that Jason Silva and many others describe the perception of awe, right? We have an awe-inspiring experience. Jason Silva will say it's something like, like the birth of our child, or seeing the Grand Canyon, or the first time we see photos of the Hubble telescope from space. Whatever that experience of awe is, that allows us to fall in love with the world in a way that opens our hearts and creates compassion, in as much as we almost want to. It's almost like that moment where you're like, I need to remember this, because I feel like I'm going to go back to my old life and old things are going to set in, and I'm going to think that everything is just the same. But if I can just remember this feeling, then I could never go back to the way that things were before, and I'm always going to have access to the miraculousness, right? Even when I was, way pre-awakening, when I was very much, in my anxiety and depression and didn't understand the way that all of these things worked, I would get glimpses sometimes that I would remember in the back of my head, and I'd be like, I'm so happy right now. I have to save this. I have to bookmark it, and I have to remember. Even if I can't call up that feeling in the future, I have to remember that at some point I was this happy, and I can be that happy again. And sometimes experiences like that are what kept me going through my deepest and darkest depressive episodes. So really what we're looking at is we're looking for experiences of awe, and these can be experienced outside the realm of psychedelics as well. I think the most transformative, for me, experience of awe, and certainly it's no coincidence that this started happening around the time that I began intentionally using plant medicines. But these incidences that I'm speaking of happened when I was completely sober. So it wasn't just about, I'm having some drug trip and like, wow. No, I was also expanding my consciousness, and I was working with plant medicines in order to be able to open up and receive more. But if anything, it was that overall intention to open up that was touching every aspect of my life and wasn't consigned to just the time that I was spending in those ceremonies. Something started happening to me that I really started noticing around 2016, when my spiritual path really picked up. And that was that I could no longer deny that there was an outside intelligence that I was specifically dialoguing with when I set intentions, when I asked for clarity, and when I essentially went about the process of setting an intention and then discerning everything that was showing up for me to show me what I needed to clear in service of that intention. Spirit had to be super, super loud because I was very skeptical. I'm from New York. I was highly conditioned with an energy that told me that being too feminine, being too spiritual, believing in things that other people didn't believe was going to be dangerous for me. So Spirit had to be super loud. I love working with open-minded skeptics, by the way, because I always tell people, don't take my word for it. Don't just believe me. Just be open and be curious about it and watch what shows up. Allow Spirit to show up for you so that you see it. And that's what started happening for me, is I started seeing signs, things that were I couldn't explain them by coincidence. I showed them to other people who were very skeptical, and they credited me with single-handedly stretching their magical Overton window, right? The amount of belief that they were willing to suspend, the amount of disbelief they were willing to suspend or had to suspend in order to take in my stories. And I saved pictures of things. I saved proof. I was like, y'all are not going to believe what this is and how this is happening. So, so that perception, that idea that my mind was stretched in that way, I could never return to the way that I was before, because I knew that there was something else that was working with me cooperatively to help me bring about my goals and my intentions. And my obsessions started transferring from the 3D plane reality of what do I do, how do I interact with this person, what do I, to being in the 5D cosmic reality of what do I do here on my spiritual path to move forward, right? I'm not prescribing that as a way of being also. I'm just saying, like, when we're starting out, we have to transfer that energy somewhere. Eventually we come to this place of like rest and peace, hopefully, right? But while we're still on that, while we're still running the hamster wheel, switching our attention, our focus from what's just in our immediate grounded reality that we can perceive, switching that to that dialogue when messages are coming through in signs and synchronicities and coincidences that are way, way, way too miraculous and weird and strange to possibly just be chance. Things that are happening just way against the odds. Super, super clear, super loud. I wish I could give you guys examples. I don't want to make this video too long, but we'll get into that conversation at other times. Perceiving those things. When my mind had been stretched that far, I could no longer go back to the way it was before. And that is what really helped me on my path forward. That's what psychedelics, I believe, can do for us as well. They allow us to enter an altered state of consciousness so that we can perceive the world in a new way, that our mind can, such that our minds can never return to the smallness of how they were before. It is important to use these intentionally. It's funny, sometimes I'll look around and be like, wow, there's a lot of people who are doing a lot of drugs, but they're not they're not expanding their consciousness, right? Sometimes I wonder, I'll see people who are using a lot of psychedelics recreationally, but not using them for expanded consciousness. And sometimes I'll just wonder, I'll be like, how did you miss? How are you on like mushrooms for 12 hours? And you didn't see, like, maybe it's all just a movie, maybe it's just, maybe they're not examining it. I'm not sure. Not for me to say. But using it intentionally is really important. Using it in a place where you feel safe. Using it with guidance. I don't recommend doing it alone. Using it with the guidance of people who you trust and people who are more experienced in that regard. Definitely, that's a high recommend. But either way, there are a lot of ways for your consciousness to be expanded by an experience of awe, such that it cannot return to the way it was before. Psychedelics are one means of getting there. I believe that in many ways the success of the repatterning project is because seeing so many truths lined up in a way that makes everything make sense is in itself enough to expand the mind, such that we notice now what's happening or what we're doing or what patterns are forming or what habits we're giving into and why that might be happening and what's going on and how we can fix and change that if we want to. Once we know that we have that power, we can't return to our former powerlessness without really making some big, big excuses, right? If we want to, of course, we'll find a way. Someone will be like, no, that doesn't work. I'm definitely stuck about everything. And I see that, I see some comments on videos that are like that and everything, right? But once we really commit to that path, that's why I believe that it really works. It's because once we have that knowledge and that understanding of how our human operating systems work and how everything functions together as a system, then we can do we can take our power back to program our systems ourselves. Once we understand how it works, we are no longer at the mercy of being programmed just by our circumstances around us. So that, I believe, is the benefit of plant medicines such as psychedelics, and also also simply of the Repatterning Project. It's just about expanding our consciousness, shaping our minds with ideas that are big enough that we can no longer return to the smallness of who we were before. So I hope that's helpful, and I'd love to see everyone join us and also experience this work. So hang in there, and we will get to our next session this summer. I'd love to see you there.